Welcome to Streams of Income with self-help author Ryan Rieger. For the next hour, you'll hear proven methods for how to live the multiple income streams dream. Ryan is passionate about helping others discover their gifts and start their own business. He's published 5 books, and his courses and group coaching programs have changed the lives of thousands of students all over the world. Ryan's books include Private Label, The Easy Way, Finding Your Grace Place, and his latest, Streams of Income. And now, here's your host, Ryan Rieger.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Streams of Income radio show. I'm your host, Ryan Rieger, and today we are chatting with my good friend and returning guest, Mark Willis. Mark is the founder of Lake Growth Financial, and he always brings such good value. And today we are talking about the dollar. What would happen if the dollar collapsed or if it went away? And I just always enjoy having Mark's perspective on things because he's just level-headed. He'll tell you like it is. He predicts some things on this podcast. I know you want to listen to that, but specifically, we also talked about how an event like that might affect whole life insurance policies. So he has a program called Bank on Yourself. He's a Bank on Yourself advisor where you're using whole life insurance policies to build wealth. And so I wanted to know personally, what would happen to those policies if the dollar collapsed? And if you have a policy or you're thinking about going that direction at all, you'll want to hear what he says about that. But this is a really good episode. I always enjoy having Mark on. I always learn something new, always take lots of notes. But here is my episode with Mark. Oh, one quick thing before we go there. If you want to check out hear more about the policies, what those are, if you want to talk to somebody, totally free call. Go to ryanrieger.com/bank on yourself, ryanrieger.com/bank on yourself. Here's Mark. Mark, welcome back to Streams of Income.
Ryan, thanks so much, man. Glad to be on.
I don't even know how many times this is now. Maybe if I had to guess, maybe 7 or 8.
I'm like the Steve Martin of Saturday Night Live with your show, and I'm so honored, man. I'm so glad to be back on.
Well, I always love having you on. For me, it's a little bit selfish because I get to ask you questions that I'm thinking about too. And so, what are we chatting about today?
Well, I think you brought up before we hit record something that's been in the ether lately. There's quite a bit of volatility, no shortage in the headlines, in the news headlines. And as we've gone through a major worldwide pandemic, and as we've printed 40% of all the US dollars that we've ever had in ever in all of existence are currently in circulation today. And we've only seen the US population since 1990. We've seen the US population go up in number by about 10%. But we've seen the US dollar population, like the number of dollars in circulation, has gone up by 1,000%.
Wow.
Just since 1990. So that tells you something about why price for homes has gone up. You know, I remember my parents bought a good house for $90,000. It was Homes in the 90s, was on the billboard outside the neighborhood, Homes in the 90s, because it was in the 1990s. So I figured that's what they meant. No, it was $90,000 for a house, for a really nice, middle class style house. Now to get that same house, it would be closer to $900,000, I'm sure, because of these implications of all this money printing we've done. And it's led a lot of people to think, well, wait a minute. What if other countries stop, buying our treasuries? What if they stop taking dollars for oil or gas or whatever? What if we no longer are the world's reserve currency? What if the dollar disappears? And I think that's the topic you were kind of curious about. It. Did I put words in your mouth?
Because I've been watching, financial news. Listen to people like Robert Kiyosaki, who I respect, and obviously love the Rich Dad Poor Dad book. And so he talks about, the dollar could go away. And I know you just said that before we hit record that you've heard that for 11 or 12 years since you've been in this business. But what if it actually did? What would happen to our policies? We're talking about our Bank on Yourself policies, whole life dividend paying whole life insurance policies that you guys can go back to other episodes if you want to know the basics of what those policies are. But my wife and I have had several of them now for years, loved them. And I was literally thinking the other day, like, I can't wait to talk to Mark because I do want to know what would happen to my policy, because I log in online, I could see the amount of cash value in there. And of course it has dollars next to it. Because if I decided to take a loan, I will get US dollars into my bank account. But what if the US dollar doesn't exist?
Yeah.
What happens?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let's kind of get into this. So, first of all, are we really on the brink of economic collapse? And someday, I always tell folks, someday there will be the last dollar will, be used to warm somebody in their fireplace, right? So there will come an end to the dollar. That much is sure. All things on this side of heaven are basically firewood at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But the question is, how soon? And are we on the brink of collapse? It's really difficult. Niels Bohr once said that it's really difficult to prediction is extremely difficult, especially when it involves the future, which is like every time you predict. Right. So no one knows the future is the short answer. That's the short answer. Now, the slightly more complex answer, it's unlikely the dollar is going to collapse completely in the near term. Mm-hmm. The U.S. economy is still the largest in the world by far, and China is looking weaker and weaker as we see more and more reports coming out about the true state of their economy. Mm-hmm. And it looks like they may or may not ever surpass the U.S., at least not in our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. So there is still the key place for worldwide investment is in the United States. It's also one of the more stable governments, short of all the craziness you see on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or whatever. It's still more stable than, Venezuela or something like that. Yeah. But there are certainly some big challenges that the U.S. needs to address. So here, I'll say this. Let's go back to first principles. There are two basic truths that I rely on for the financial benchmark regarding the United States, which is one, the American people are always going to have a basic need for currency to purchase goods and services. That's bar none. Money goes back to caveman time. Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be some sort of need to trade with something to intermediate that trade.
We're not all going to start like grazing chickens, and you have you and your wife make the wool, and so I'm going to trade chickens for wool so we can sew clothes. Yeah, that's not happening.
Bartering. There's a great book on this. It's called Debt: The First 5,000 Years, and it's by David Graeber. Great book about debt, but money and debt are intertwined in his book, and I agree. Even bartering is less favorable than just trading seashells back and forth. I mean, they've used all sorts of things for money, whether it's a greenback dollar or not. So that's the first truth, is that the American people are always going to have a need for currency. Second, as long as there is free enterprise in America, there's always going to be a need to raise capital to create or sustain businesses and free enterprise. So let's kind of dig into this. Number one, whether it's the crypto dollar or the current US dollar, or if we're simply just trading water bottles, we got to have some kind of currency. Yeah. It's better than going into full barter mode, to convince people to, trade your pomegranates for my, sharp axe or whatever. So, if there was so much money created that it just became worthless, it would be a lot like the Weimar Republic in Germany. The story where they printed so much money that, $1 US was like 10 trillion German marks at the end of World War I. So, until you can really convert all of your wealth into gold, unless you're King Midas, basically, and it would be really hard to eat gold or live in a house of gold, for example, then we're all going to be subject to currency valuations. Yeah. So if our government were to default on its debt, then they might reset the currency, and owning gold would be illegal at that point. In fact, if that sounds like a conspiracy theory, you might know this. Yeah, it's already happened. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Tell us that story. Do you know any details?
I don't know the story, but I literally was listening to a Robert Kiyosaki podcast episode, and I remember them referencing a time when gold was illegal to have.
Yeah, not that long ago, under 100 years ago, actually. FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, made owning gold illegal in America. Wow. And it's possible, and even likely, conservative and liberal outlets on the news are saying it could happen again. So that's the first piece. The second is, if free enterprise ceases to exist, if we no longer are a free country, then our nation has been maybe either converted to or taken over by like a totally totalitarian regime. It forbids private ownership. If we really get to that point, then it won't matter what money is, because we'll be owned completely by the state, and it owns us, it owns our labor, it owns our stuff. So somewhere between those two extremes, totally free enterprise where we can trade what we want, and then the end result of totalitarianism. There's like a lot of room to guess as to what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll hush for a minute. Any feedback or ideas or comments?
Yeah, so you're talking about the second would be like we would be in the Soviet Union, correct?
Right. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, where we really own nothing and we're either happy or not so happy.
Yeah.
So, if the dollar goes down tremendously, it's going to do a few things. Number one, it'll force interest rates high. And we've already seen some of this. So this zero or negative interest rates that we see in Europe, or we saw in Japan, or we saw in our own country up until a few years ago, that's more likely to happen as we're going to have interest rates go up and we continue to use the dollar. It's just going to take more dollars to buy our gallon of milk. So you asked about bank on yourself policies. Let's get to that for a minute. There's a real big distinction here. With whole life insurance, we're not like holding a savings account that happens to have a death benefit attached. That's not what bank on yourself is. And for those folks that don't know what it is, the quick skinny, and you already brought it up, it's using a modernized form of dividend paying whole life insurance. And that it's an insurance contract with an insurance company. So it's not like a savings account. It's not even like a mutual fund. It's a contract. And that contract is unilaterally assigned by the insurance company. What does that mean? That just means that the insurance company wrote all the language and you just basically signed agree, yes or no. When it's a unilateral contract, this means that the insurance company cannot just change their mind later on or get out of the contract. Courts have sided with the signer of a unilateral contract in all of Western civilization. So if you write up all the terms of a deal and you sneak in there some sort of, get out of jail free card into your contract and you send it to me and I sign it, and Ryan, I somehow later find this little get out of jail free card in your contract, I could take you to court and you would lose because you wrote the contract. I just signed it. Yeah. If we'd negotiated that contract, it would be a messier situation. So does that concept of unilateral make sense?
Yep.
So, when we sign a whole life insurance policy, it's a contract unilaterally written by the insurance company. And a few things don't change. One, our policy values won't change. However, the rest of the world will change. So we might have had $500,000 of cash value, and that would have felt rich and beautiful a few years ago. But maybe in the future, $500,000 is only enough to buy you, a nice car, and that's it in the future. So if milk becomes 10 times more expensive, then our existing cash value will be 10 times less valuable to us. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That concept makes sense. So the policy value can't change. It's a contract.
Yep.
So all of the other world assets will change. We'll buy less stuff with our policies.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of advantages here too. Number one, our whole life insurance premiums do not go up with inflation. So think about that for a minute. In a world where milk and gas and electricity, everything else is getting more expensive, you are contractually given the right to have a premium that will never go up, no matter how bad inflation gets. Like imagine if you had a relationship with a grocery store, Ryan, and they guaranteed you, they signed a contract that your price for your groceries would never be more than $100 a month, no matter what happened in the world. Like eggs are always going to be 99 cents for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Where do I sign? I want that right now.
Yeah, where do I sign? That's kind of what you have with the whole life policy. Yeah. It's one of the only things that does not go up with inflation, guaranteed. So that's the first piece. So when dollars are devalued, it makes the premiums you're putting into that policy much easier to pay. One of the only ways you can do that is through the contract. The other piece is as interest rates rise, that is only good news for dividends. The whole life policy actually is somewhat responsive to the overall interest rates, bonds, mortgages. If we have 18% mortgages, like we already have had in this country, by the way, in 1980, the mortgage rates were up at 21%. Can you imagine that?
Wow, that's crazy.
And guess what? How did dividends do during that period of time? Oh yeah, whole life insurance dividends were going into the double digits and keeping up with inflation and keeping up with the mortgage rates. So I'm not that I want hyperinflation or anything, but I'm kind of cheering on this return to more normal interest rates in this country, because it only means good news, Ryan, for your policies, for my policies. So again, why don't I hush for a minute? What's not clear? What would you like to dig deeper into?
No, I think it's very clear. Yeah, I remember talking about on a previous episode with you that rising interest rates actually is, not great for when you go to the grocery store, but it's for your policies is actually a good thing because the dividends will increase. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but as far as the dollar itself, I don't expect it'll go away completely. And one more reason why is because, Congress is the one that issues these dollars. And there's an interesting reason why. You think about it, like, why do they require that we pay our taxes in dollars? Why do you think that's the case? Why is it paid in dollars? They could print infinite amounts of money. Yeah. Why would they want us to pay our taxes in dollars? You think they'd want to collect other things, right?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, of all things, they've got a printing press for money. So why do they ask us to give them our tax money? I mean, there's a lot of maybe potential answers to that, but the best answer I can come up with is control. And I don't mean to sound conspiratorial. I just mean, like, in the most positive sense of the word, they're interested in, influencing our behavior with things surrounding money. They know that if we want to live on the right side of a jail cell, we'll pay our tax bill.
Right.
And they use the dollar by point of the gun, really, to tell us to pay that tax bill in dollars. That's why you don't pay your taxes. That's why your groceries are charged in dollars. It's why all of your other assets are denominated in dollars, because the grocer has to pay his taxes in dollars. Okay, so why do we not pay our groceries in jelly beans? Because the grocer is collecting your dollar bill, and then he sends that money, part of it, to the government. So that's why we all use the dollar. Now, I say control, I just mean things like, investing in real estate and, helping incentivize us to lower our taxes through doing things that are, smart tax saving strategies. Okay. Like, again, investing in real estate and other things. So I'm coming around to my final thoughts, and I promise I'll hush and get your feedback on all this. But is the dollar going to disappear? The short answer is I don't think so. But even if I'm wrong, here's what happens with our policies. I believe that the dollar is not going away for the reasons I mentioned. Congress is still going to want to, influence our behavior. They're going to use some sort of currency to do so. I believe that there are still enough people around the world who look to the U.S. as the central, financial hub of the world. Too many bank plumbing systems are baked into the U.S. dollar at this point. And they would all suffer greatly if they, meaning other countries, got off the dollar. So that's all fine and dandy. Now, what if I'm wrong and we do get off the dollar? What happens next? Well, the whole life policy is a contract. We've talked about that. And they are required to pay the cash values and death benefits and everything else under the legal tender of the land, according to the contract. So if we move to, some sort of crypto dollar or the euro, like you mentioned earlier, before we hit record, or some other, the Swedish kroner, or water bottles, or Bitcoin or something else, we would immediately have a new contract, whole life contract, denominated in that new legal asset, whatever that is. Okay. So that's what would happen. You'd see your $1 million death benefit exchanged now for X US dollars have now been converted into Y euro. Yeah. Or, crypto dollar or whatever. So yeah. Let's talk about implications of that. But first, before I do that, let me get off my high horse. What feedback?
No, that's good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. To know, because I thought, man, obviously I know these are guaranteed investments, but what happens when if the world just like kind of collapsed like that, how would the insurance companies, how would that affect what they're doing, since it's it's kind of outside their control, honestly, if something like that happened. So what does that do to their obligation to pay us? And you mentioned before we hit record too that, I mean, I would imagine that if the dollar did go away, I'd still have to be responsible for paying my mortgage. And so that'd be great if it went away. Yeah, I have no mortgage. But it's going to be transferred into something else, and I'll still owe that.
You've got a
new
contract.
Legal tender is. Yeah,
you got a contract with your mortgage company, and assuming the world continues on, I always ask what happens the day after the dollar disappears, and assuming your bonds and there's trillions of dollars of bonds in this world, what are they going to do? Because those are coupon payments that have to be paid somehow. What about every mortgage in the world? There's another $100 trillion of mortgage debt out there.
Yeah.
All those dollars become something else the day after the dollar disappears. And I can't imagine it's a one-day event, but if it was the next day, what's the day after the rapture going to look like here? And all contracts would be converted to the new currency of whatever it is. She sells by the seashore. You'd be basically collecting your new currency, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So what can you do to take advantage of this? Let's say, for example, that you saw the writing on the wall, Ryan, and you saw that the dollar was impending its final demise. And you looked at your whole life policies, and you had a significant amount of money in there due to all the inflation and whatever else that had gone on. Plus, smartly, you've been packing money into that thing, saving, protecting, growing that money with guarantees. So now you have a sizable couple of policies that you can use right away. And I don't know if your listeners know this, but these whole life policies, you can borrow against them. And when you borrow against these policies, the neat thing is they continue to grow and earn a guaranteed interest and also dividends as if you had not borrowed the cash out. So let's say you had $500,000 of cash value, Ryan, and you decided that, you know what, the dollar's done. I'm moving to gold or whatever you chose. You could borrow against that whole life policy and go buy a bunch of gold. And let's say that you were wrong and the dollar becomes stronger. And they're actually including the dollar milkshake theory and a couple of other theories out there. There's a couple theories that say the dollar is going to become stronger. And so far, by the way, it has. The dollar, even today, I was looking at the reports, the dollar is as strong as anyone could have ever expected a year ago with everything we've been going through. So interesting. And that's what happened in 2008, too. We all said this is the end of the dollar. This is the global financial crisis. We're leaving the dollar. And all the countries, including China and more, rushed to buy dollars to support their own currency. So when we thought that was the obituary being written on the dollar, and it actually became strongest it's ever been up until this year. So it's now stronger now than it was in 2008. Interesting conversation there. But back to our story, if you're wrong and the dollar goes strong, and let's say gold fails, becomes less valuable, well, bummer. You didn't get the beautiful gold bars to quadruple in value, but you at least got the continuous growth of your whole life policy earning for you. Yes, you have a policy loan that you would repay over time. You could do that on your terms. But Ryan, the cool thing is the policy had continued to grow with dollars in that scenario where you borrowed from the policy to buy gold. Gold failed, but the policy continued to grow. At least you won in that scenario.
Right.
What if you're right and the dollar does collapse and you borrowed all that money out to go buy gold? Gold takes off. Policy is now, it's still there, but it's converted to a worthless currency of some sort, crypto dollar or whatever junk they give you. But now you have a real asset you can trade with your fellow man in the black market, using gold coins or whatever. So you win or you win. It's as Robert Kiyosaki likes to say, there's three sides to every coin. There's heads, there's tails, and there's the edge. Play the edge when you use your policy. It's a contract with wealth, not with dollars. It's a contract with wealth. And the more wealth you have, the more you can use that for various investments. Push back hard on this, man. If I'm making no sense
No, I'm
at all.
learning. I'm taking notes here. And that's the main question I had. I was like, seriously, I can't wait to talk to you about this, because I'm thinking this has been in my mind. Like, I don't want to be stupid with things going on in the world. What can I do to be proactive rather than it be like, I don't want it to be like December of 2007 and, about to get my head chopped off. And, if I knew what was if I was, I know folks that are older than us that lost a lot of money in retirement because they had it in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
What could they have done in 2007 to prepare? So I'm thinking the same thing. Like, what do I do with the money that we have, and how does that affect the policies? That was a legitimate question. You answered it. So
yeah, man. Well, again, no one knows the future, and certainly we'll all find out together. But we've gone through this before. Insurance companies predate the Internal Revenue Service by 100 plus years, and the U.S. dollar has only been around since after the Civil War, and many of the insurance companies that we work with predate the Civil War.
Wow.
And life insurance continues on, So what were they doing? How were they paying claims before the US dollar?
Yeah.
Probably how they're going to do it after the US dollar.
Yeah.
And I have one more thing to say. I promise I'll try to keep this brief.
That's good.
But I have one more prediction to make, since this is a episode about predictions.
Yeah.
I'm going to predict on this podcast, make it known, write it in the clouds or whatever, that the book will outlast the Kindle. That's my bold prediction.
Yes.
And what am I? And I would say that that the chair will outlast the iPhone. These are my strange and bold prediction. I know it's wild to say, but so this is something known as the Lindy effect. The Lindy effect is an idea that the longer something has existed, the longer its life expectancy. So the longer something's existed, the longer its life expectancy. This means that the Bible will continue to outsell this week's New York Times bestseller, because the Bible is surviving through thousands of years, whereas this week's New York Times bestsellers, it's gone next week.
Yes.
So what does this have to do with your money? Well, whole life insurance predates the stock market. It predates crypto. It predates, it goes back thousands of years. If you want to go back to the Roman Empire, and whole life insurance is a derivative of the insurance contracts that were there in the Roman Empire. So I believe that it will outlast things as new as the US dollar because of the same reason. The Lindy effect is a reminder that you want to put your money in things that are more permanent than this week's flash in the pan stock that you've read about on Reddit. So that's my final thought. Invest in things, find things, save money in things that hold to the Lindy effect, that have survived and even become stronger during similar situations like we're in today.
That's good. So you're saying invest in chairs and books?
That's right. And water bottles and ammunition and whatever else you think the world is going to need in the future.
Right? Oh my gosh. I know you got like 6 minutes left. Are there any case studies, examples of any new client things they're using their policies for? Anything fun related to that? I know some people just put their money in and they see it grow, but a lot of people will pull money out and invest in real estate. You even said that Robert Kiyosaki has policies and he invests in different things, after borrowing out from those policies.
Well, there's so many options here, and guys, check out our shows at Not Your Average Financial Podcast if you want to get all the details. We just interviewed someone who used his policy to buy his house, and then later he used his same policy after he had got into the house. He used it to purchase some solar panels on the house. Not only did he get the solar panels, but he also got the tax credit, and he actually got paid to install his solar due to the tax credits.
Yeah.
And the policy he used his policy to get a better deal on the solar panels by paying a lump sum versus getting on their payment plan.
So he bought his house with cash, pulling out money from the policy. And so then just paid him, he just made a mortgage with himself then, correct?
That's right. Yeah. And a lot of people are doing that right now because interest rates have gone up dramatically. The mortgages I'm seeing are 7% even.
Okay.
Whole life policy loans are going to be dramatically less than that, and you're in control of that repayment process. So you can, build your own mortgage. You can set up your own repayment plan.
So cool.
Skip a few payments, whatever. A lot of people are using that as an all cash purchase, or even as one more example is to use it for private lending. If you want to lend money to somebody else who wants to buy a property, so they can just basically be the mortgage company. Lots of creative ideas.
That's awesome. So guys, go to, my wife and I have several of them now and love them. So go to ryanrieger.com/bank on yourself. Call, you can, when they do that, they'll fill out a form. I'll send the lead over to you guys and you'll either talk to Mark or one of the guys on his team about your specific situation, but it's a totally free call just to chat with them and see if this might be a fit for you.
Yeah, maybe I'm blind and I missed something major on this dollar thing, and I'm very much on the bleeding side of the cutting edge here with just learning. Give me all of your feedback, push back on this as hard as you want. I'm not afraid to talk about these topics, and we need to be aware of what the implications are, positive or negative, because it's your money. No one should care more about it than you do. So it's ryanrieger.com/bank on yourself.
Awesome. Mark, thank you. Appreciate you being on again, man.
My pleasure, brother. Great to be on the show with you, man.
All right, we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to Streams of Income with self-help author Ryan Rieger. From right here in the Dallas Metroplex, Ryan teaches several entrepreneurial courses and group coaching programs to students all over the world. Be sure to listen next week at the same time for Streams of Income with Ryan Rieger.